Hey, hello. What's up? Summer humor across the media 22. Bah, 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 bah. That's an air horn. Bah, 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 bah. Yeah, you didn't think you were gonna go the whole session without hearing from me, did you? That would be pretty lame if you literally were just going to a website and leaving comments in the abyss to no one. Yeah, what is what's a college course if not, if there's no input from the professor? And in the past, I used to try to like respond to the comments. Like it would take me 24 hours to go through all of them and give responses. So I started doing these video responses, and it seems to work out, except people don't watch them. So you should, because again, what's the point of taking this course if you're just gonna watch Team America and not have an interaction about it? Um, this video is about Bo Burnham and Outside. Uh, and I appreciate the comments. You guys are starting to get into it. Comments are great. I went through the ones for Burnham, and I'll talk about them as I give you my thoughts. Um, so a little about Bo Burnham. I'm always surprised to see uh, when like some of you hadn't heard of him. I get it. He's not like famous, but Inside was such a seminal moment in the pandemic. I just assumed everybody, especially like everybody your age, um, saw it, which is dumb. But I'm always like, oh, I hadn't heard of it, so I'm glad that a lot of you got to experience it for the first time. Um, little about Bo Burnham. Some of you mentioned he's a genius. He's super talented. Yeah, you know, he was signed. Comedy Central signed him to this development deal at 17. His first special he filmed at 19. It's all. I mean, this is all very depressing for somebody who thought he could be a comedian. That's me. But I'm like teaching this stuff in class, and I'm like, oh, don't worry, he was 19. He was younger than you are right now. And everyone's like, oh, wah, wah. So that in and of itself is pretty impressive. And a lot of you brought up, sorry, a lot of you brought up mental health, right? Inside is sort of this culmination of an analysis of his own mental health. He talks about it in one of the songs, but if you go back and watch his specials that sort of precede this one, um, he's you'll hear a dialogue almost about his own mental health. It's really interesting to go back, and there's tons of connections between the previous specials and this, and sort of how the pandemic kind of exacerbated all of his worst attributes, right? And specifically with mental health. Um, so he's he's sort of this new. He's not a new comedian. He's very unique. Like no one's really doing what he's doing. Hassan Minhaj kind of uses, but it's certainly not on this level. just uses technology and stuff like that. Um, but the way he uses music and the way he dismantles the form, like a couple of you guys mentioned it. Um, his whole a big thing about his comedy, in addition to like mental health and social issues and things like that, is sort of dismantling the form of stand-up comedy itself, right? Forcing people to have this discussion about, is it really comedy? Is it really stand-up? Which is just stupid. It's a stupid argument. It's a stupid discussion to have. But that's sort of what he's trying to do, is say stand up in general, or healing the world through comedy, that whole thing. Like, I I believe he believes that he can heal the world with comedy. Not just he, we, right? I mean, if I didn't believe that, why, why would I teach classes like this if I didn't believe that there was some sort of larger value to it? Um, but his his performances are comments on stand up in general, and how a lot of comedians don't take the opportunities that are there, right? Going up on stage and saying, "Hey, black people are like this and white people are like this." Am I right? Like, that's, who is that helping? Right? That's not even funny anymore. It's like, people are different. Hilarious, right, guys? Um, so he's constantly critiquing comedy, stand up specifically, dismantling it, trying to show that, you know, comedy is this idea that can change the world if we let it, right? And understand it in a way that is bigger than just jokes, right? Um, and all of this kind of culminates in inside. Um, so the special itself, I mean, when it came out, I watched it like 8 times in a row, just because I'm like, oh, this is happening. I know this is. I'm going to use this in in some way, and I actually, when did it come out? Whatever. What I'm talking about. It is this culmination of his uh, I think the mental health issue, as I mentioned before. Like, if you watch all of his specials in a row, you'll hear this dialogue of two things: the mental health thing, talking about his own mental health, and his specials sort of are reflections or projections of that. Um, the constant self analysis and all these kinds of things, and then there's that, and the critique of comedy in general, right? Um, so he opens with, you know, healing the world through comedy, which is obviously, that's like laughter's the best medicine, right? Like, it's kind of a play on that adage, which is obviously ironic or a joke, but not really, right? So he does. I got some notes over here. So, um, but where did I write that down? And Lou kind of talked about this. I'll get to that in a second. But like, the song "Healing the World Through Comedy," right? Where he's a special kind of white guy. The lyrics, the chorus at least, if you wake up in a house that's full of smoke, don't panic, call me and I'll tell you a joke. That, not really. Like, don't really do that. That's him being ironic and joking, because that's not, like, people misconstrue that, right? That's not what comedy can save. Can't save us from fires, can't save us from having a heart attack, can't save us from those kinds of things. But what he's saying is comedy can save us from ourselves, right? All that self awareness, we all need more of it, right? I think that's part of what he's talking about in Inside. Is like we've become so hyper self aware, but we need to even figure that out, right? Because your self awareness can either, it needs to be the right kind of self awareness. We're all self aware in that how we look online, like honing and shaping our online identity so that people think we are something we're probably not. Like, that's not the kind of self awareness we're talking about. So, like, if you wake up in a house that's full of smoke, don't panic, call me and I'll tell you a joke. Like, duh, not really. But he says, should I be joking at a time like this? Yes, 100% we should be joking at a time like this. The pandemic. What, oh shit. Should I be joking at a time like this? 100%. Right? Michelle brought it up. Well, I brought it up. Michelle reiterated it. And I do appreciate all of the references to my intro video in your comments. Noted. Um, if if you believe me, and comedy exists where shit's most fucked up, the pandemic was fucked up. There's got to be something funny there. These are the times like this that we should be joking about, right? So there's this, and back to Lou's comment. Um, I think what Lou said, what's his goal? What the goal of this is? And I think increasingly in comedy now, not just Bo Burnham, across the board, the goal is not simply make you laugh at all costs. Like, do anything for a laugh. I don't think it's that anymore. I think a lot of comedians, and this is kind of what Bo Burnham critiques throughout his career, is like just doing comedy for the money and for the laughs is kind of disingenuous at this point. And if you look at, there's been tons of specials in this, in like the last 5 years, maybe comedy has moved toward the more introspective and confessional. Like Inside is a perfect example. Hannah Gadsby's Nanette, Gary Gulman, The Great Depression, uh, Patton Oswalt, Annihilation, about death of his wife. Tig Notaro's Cancer Set. I mean, everybody. Gerard Carmichael's Nathaniel just came out recently. Um, like, funny, poignant, heartfelt. Like, it's not just about dick jokes anymore. It's not at the expense of dick jokes. Dick jokes and jokes, like, Bo Burnham does a good job of doing that too. He's not all analytical, right? There's always, he'll balance it with some silly thing. Right? So to say that this movement in comedy isn't comedic is duh. Who said that? Someone in the comments. Um, Leslie. The idea of funny and serious, right? Well, that's something that people misconstrue, right? The opposite of funny is not funny, Like people think the opposite of funny is serious. The opposite of funny is not funny. So to think that something can't at once be comedic and critical or meaningful is kind of irresponsible at this in this day and age. And most of us have been brought up to view comedy as, I think I mentioned this in the intro, to see comedy as, oh, it's just for entertainment, it's just for shits and giggles. Like, who cares? Like, you can't you can't think about it, you can't talk about it. There's nothing to talk about. Um, so I think a lot of comedians, any comedian worth his or her salt, is wants you to think as well. And the more you think about it, the funnier it gets in many cases. But um, back to, comedy can save us from ourselves, not necessarily, tragedy, but ourselves. Like we need to be more introspective, more self-critical, more, but not in the like, oh, I don't like my hips or whatever. Like not that kind of self-critical, but just like critical of who we are, what we believe, our values, those kinds of things. Um, my notes are all over the place, so just hang on for the ride. Yes. Um, I usually there's two questions I pose typically with this. Will comedy save us? Question mark. And will this be relevant? This inside. Will it be relevant in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Will people look back at it and be like, "The fuck is this?" I think he does a good job of explaining like he's in this room, it's quarantine, this happened, but like it's especially relevant to you guys. Like we literally, many of you mentioned like we're just now kind of starting to process what the fuck just happened. Um, I mentioned before. I think comedy can save us if we as an Earth could learn to glean the benefits of humor, like good comedy and humor, and turn that into new and maybe more open minded perspectives on things in the world, I think we can heal the world through comedy. Um, that's another thing that he, a thread that runs through a lot of his specials is how this can happen, right? Um, the song "Healing the World Through Comedy." There's others and other specials that comment on that. So, what else right here? That constant self-analysis, like again, it's a double-edged sword. I think you just have to be equipped to know how to do it. We don't need to be like self-analyzing the superficial, like our bodies, our language, like our basically our social media profiles, right? That's not the stuff that we need to be self critical of or self analyze. Just the bigger picture, like our role in how the world, that's how the world works, and the changes that need to happen, and things like that. Um, I often say, maybe I said it in the intro, I can't remember, it was a while ago. Like, shit, now I forgot what I was going to say. Anyway, Forget that. Um, there's I used to say this all the time. Like, if any of you have seen Louis C.K., he's the much maligned comedian, but he was always funny. Um, I would say Louis knows he's an asshole. Bo Burnham is trying to figure out if he's an asshole, right? There's that constant, you hear it throughout Inside the whole time. Like, yes, I'm this white, male, privileged asshole, but I don't want to be. So, how do I go about not being that, right? And goes back and forth between, do I give away my money? No, I don't do that. The whole Aladdin. I dressed up as Aladdin once. Was that problematic? Like, what do I do? Do I burn it? No, don't burn it, which is the bad. That whole thing, he's trying, at least, right? As a white male, you know, who's had them, has had the mic for 400 years or whatever. Like, I think he's trying. That's all we can ask, right? Is that we're all trying to be better versions of ourselves and you know project good into the world. Um, but he makes this point through Inside where it's obviously a parody of the internet, and it makes sense that there was the outtakes was an hour long, because if you're gonna parody the internet, you're gonna yeah, you can't do it in an hour. Like, so everything, from the, the white woman's Instagram, FaceTime with my mom, the Twitch thing, which the Twitch thing is hilarious. Um, the reaction videos, the sexting, like all that stuff. And then there's, in the follow up, there's the podcast, there's the dump interview, there's all these kinds of things that have be have been created by the internet, and we don't need really any of them, right? Like, they're just functions of this thing. Um, but we weren't we humans, like, this isn't part of our evolution. I don't think we weren't meant to live with an audience. Like, I think that's something that I know he's passionate about, because I've heard him. If you've seen his movie Eighth Grade, which is brilliant, it's really good. It's about this girl and basically her relationship with her phone and likes and all the bullshit of social media. But this realization that we are constantly being watched by an audience. That's not healthy. That's just not, shouldn't be a thing. So, something that really hit me and kind of crystallized a lot of this special, and just like the way the world works now. That's how the world works. Sorry. Was when he's watching back. Like, he's just filmed. I can't remember what song it was or whatever. And he's sitting in this dark room, only lit by the blue of the screen, and he's watching it back. And, like, how much time we spend, not we, but certainly content creators, spend, like, just poring over things we, like, should not care about, right? And how that can eat at your mental stability. Just this constant sort of poring over, you know, oh, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, like that constant sort of to need to appear a certain way to an audience of people you don't even know. Like, it really gets fucking nuts when you start going down the rabbit hole. Um, he does a lot of stuff with camera angles and techniques that I don't that's over my head. But um, the one that's pretty popular, pretty easy to spot is the white woman's Instagram, the way he changes the aspect ratios, right? So every time she's singing about puppies or whatever, it's in the square Instagram. But then mixed into that, starts talking about her mother and how she misses her. Like she has an actual real moment. The screen sort of widens out to 16:9, but then right back to, so it's sort of like fake, real, fake, and how you know that stuff, like the real stuff, the powerful stuff, the meaningful stuff, the heartfelt stuff, just gets lost in the wash of trying to you know look basic, I guess. Uh, a lot of this special is, for me, like what the internet reduces us to. I think that's a through line. There's like everything this monster, as he sort of paints it in Welcome to the Internet, has, in the way it's been corporatized and things like that. It's what the internet reduces us to. It's seemingly the worst of us, the worst of humanity, is what you end up with at the end of the day. Um, I've been saying this for a long time. Like we'll take any good idea and reduce it to its shittiest aspects, right? I mean, you can think about a million things, but the internet's perfect. Like the internet, in theory, is just like infinite knowledge, right? You can look up anything, but what do we use it for? Like porn and fantasy football and like cat videos. Like that's it. Like that's yeah. Don't you think we're kind of squandering this? But what the internet reduces us to is something that I get from this. This idea that there's, we live in two worlds. There's the world we're sold, and there's the world that's real, right? That comes up in when he's the brand manager, like that thing, but more distinctly in that's how the world works, right? And Caitlin, um, what the hell does that mean? Caitlin talked about it in her comments. Um, that idea of he's playing the white man. Sacco is marginalized, whatever marginalized group, whatever you want to attach to it. Like there's the white version, and then there's the real version, and then you know the white version basically silent has the ability to silence the illusion, right? Providing the illusion of having a voice, right? Oh, why don't you tell us? But then immediately silencing it when it says something that sort of might disrupt the status quo. Um, so yeah, there's that idea of the world we're being sold and the actual um, real world. Um, Tied in with what the internet reduces us to, the pressure we put on ourselves. It's completely unnecessary and completely driven by the internet and social media and all this kind of stuff. Um, and then reality versus online, right? It's basically saying like the real world, like outside our house, is is just there to sort of capture and then come home and put online, right? Like that's such a fucked up concept, especially for somebody who grew up in the 70s and 80s, right? Like, and it's you guys kind of probably less of a mind fuck for you guys, but for me, it's just like shit, dude. That's that's real talk right there. That what the world has just become this like performance, and then you start getting into alternate realities and universes, and I don't have the patience. Uh, a lot of you brought up relatability and like being able to relate to it, and it makes sense. Like it's you he's talking about. It's not even me. I'm old. It's you he's talking about. So it makes sense that you relate to a lot of it. Um, and just a bit about relatability. Um, Yando or Jondo? I'm gonna say Yando. If I mispronounce that, let me know because I don't want to butcher it the whole summer. Um, talked about relatability. A bunch of you did, but relatability. This is my. That's all I'll say about that. Like, if you ever, if you can't relate to comedy, that's generally on you. If that makes any sense, because comedy in and of itself is an attempt to relate. Like every joke, pretty much, that's ever been told was an attempt to relate an idea or a concept or a feeling or whatever to another person. So a lot of times in classes like this, people will be like, well, I couldn't really relate to it. I'm like, well, then you're not trying, right? That's such a cop out excuse. So I couldn't really relate to it. So what? That idea of relatability is reciprocal. Like if I'm trying to relate to you, you have to try to understand my position and my take, right? So every comedian is trying to relate. Like they're putting in the effort. You also need to put in the effort. And I think you guys, I'm saying you guys did, and Bo Burnham certainly did with this special. Um, uh, what else we got here? Let me get to your comments more specifically. He loves to focus on the cognitive aspects of comedy. Like back to my point about humor in general. Like it is a cognitive it's a cognitive function. Like you have to be thinking and asking questions and constantly be sort of um, mentally agile to understand it and to get the benefits of it. Not just the analytical, but the humor. Um, and he's always talking about that. Not just inside, but the rest of his specials. A comment about that's connections. Don't worry about that. So I realize the video's getting long, but back to your specific comments. I talked about Lou, um, and she just made me think of that. Comedy can save us from ourselves, not fires or heart attacks, right? What is his goal? Um, Andrew, again, I think you're quoting me from the video, but that idea that something like inside makes these tougher topics easier to digest, right? Humor provides access to ideas, cultures, beliefs, things like that, that we otherwise would not be exposed to. Like that's a huge benefit, right? Um, that is often overlooked or ignored. Um, and that idea of being self-critical, like I this comes up a lot, like criticizing. I I'm a firm believer, and I'm shocked when I find that people are not, but we need to be critical of the things we love the most, right? I mean, aren't we in general? Like if you're not, then you're allowing those things to sort of be complacent. I got in a fight with some kid in class. It was about Trump or whatever, and I was just being critical of Trump and politics or the country. And he was one of these, oh, well, love it or leave it. Like, you can't say that stuff. And I'm like, no, like, you're supposed to be critical of the things you love the most. Like, how else will nothing changes if you're not? Nothing gets improved if you're not. Like, I always say, I'm critical of the things I love the most. My kids, super critical. How else are they going to learn? My kids, sitcoms and pizza. Boom. Critical of all of them. And I love them the most. So, like, I think being self and yourself, you should be self critical, but again, not in that superficial way. I'm just like, I don't like my, you know, yeah, I don't like how I look, or I don't like my hair, like that kind of stuff. Gotta go, dude. Focus on the core. Um, Leslie, Leslie brought up feeling less alone while watching it. I really appreciated the way, and a lot of you got kind of personal, like how this viscerally affected you. Um, Again, that's a byproduct of comedy. It's not just the entertainment part, right? Um, I probably mentioned this in that intro video, but entertainment and enlightenment, like that's comedy. It should be both. You should be entertained for sure, but you should also be enlightened and say, I never thought of it that way. Right? I probably said this too. You should say that at least once a day. Oh, huh. I never thought about it that way. You will grow as a person immensely. Um, but that feeling less alone, right? The entertainment and enlightenment. You should seek those things, everything that both of those things in every endeavor, including comedy specials. Uh, um, oh, Leslie also brought up the if I call myself out first, which is such a Bo Burnham thing. It's not just a Bo Burnham thing. It's a good comedy thing, right? It's sort of a trick of comedy, right? If you're the fat comedian, you call yourself, you make fat jokes, right? And then no one else can get you with them, right? You're like, yeah, I just said that. Um, so trying to anticipate is an old comedian's trick. You anticipate reactions and you build in responses to those reactions into your act, into your jokes, into your comedy. And Bo Burnham does it almost flawlessly, right? Um, yeah, Caitlin, you blew my mind a little bit with the Bezos thing because in the original, the Bezos songs, I was like, these are silly, these are cute, but really, I just didn't put two and two together, and it's so obvious when you mentioned it, right? Like that. here's Bezos, because that's another thread that Bo Burnham, like this criticism of corporate America and how it has basically commodified literally everything. The internet, you know, the internet, um, chief among them, but has. And then I'm like, oh, Bezos, Amazon, he's making, you did it, right? He's making all this money profiting from, you know, misery basically and exploiting this pandemic. I, I don't know. I'm dumb. I guess that's the only thing I can come up with. But Caitlin, I appreciate you sort of laying that out for me. Um, it the special is also a comment on the state of comedy today. Like that's, I think Caitlin, I think you were talking about the podcast thing. Like guys who are like, oh, you can't even say anything, like all that bullshit. It used to be so great, and like harkening back to the days of basically dudes being assholes on stage, misogynists on stage, like that kind of thing. Like it's another of his criticisms of the form and the genre of comedy and what it can was reduced to and can't be easily reduced to. Um, a lot of that masturbatory just bullshit. Um, Max brought up self awareness, and a bunch of you guys did. I think it's really important to discern between like being self aware, what we're self aware about. Um, we need to be more self aware about who we are rather than who we want people to think we are. Huh? Yeah. Gabe brought up honesty in comedy. It's a movement, dude. Like, you know, you can't. It's getting more and more difficult to skate by and be a successful comedian and not be just brutally honest. Like that's one of the luxuries that the genre provides is it's this last stand for free speech and honesty and authenticity. In many cases, I think the best comedians are embracing that. And then Aiden talked about the music of it. I'll just give you. I know it's almost 45 minutes on this video, but he's a perfect example of somebody. Like he started. And he mentions this in the special. He started when he was 16 doing shitty, like admittedly shitty, like songs in his room, and he put them on this thing called YouTube. So like the beauty of it is he's taken this journey as an artist. He could have 100%. He could have continued to do those shitty songs and made tons of money and been super famous like these fucking YouTubers like David Dobrik or whoever the fuck it is who like got this fame from YouTube and did nothing with it. Like just continued to churn out bullshit content. Bo Burnham took the platform, one of the few, I think, at least that I've encountered, that got famous, quote unquote, and then said, I'm going to do something with this. I'm not just going to coast and continue to make, shitty song parodies or whatever. I have a platform and I have a voice, and he turned it into basically inside, right? Like the music is like their songs I would listen to regardless of if they were funny or not. For the most part. Like that's a true talent. The Lonely Island does it really well too. Like really good songs, and then you're like, oh shit, and they're funny. Um, bonus. Um, and then Michelle, but the shit's fucked up. Like, you know, if the shit, if if humor exists where shit's most fucked up, like it's we are in the most hilarious time in civilization's history. Um, and then Michelle brought up also like exploiting a movement, right? How all these corporate entities are like, oh, how can we make Black Lives Matter into money? You know, how can we make Me Too into money? How can we make social justice? How can we make all these things into dollar signs? Uh, it's kind of gross when you really start to slice it that way. So, all right, I'm done. Keep the comments coming. I hope you got something out of this. Uh, go watch more Bo Burnham. I think it's a valuable exercise to do, but also watch the stuff. Right, Team America, watch it this weekend, and I'll have a video on that probably on Monday. Anyway, peace.